Hello everyone, welcome to Behind Blue Glasses. I'm Sophie and I have specific learning disabilities. Today I'm going to talk about dyslexia and my experiences with dyslexia throughout school and why I was diagnosed with dyslexia so late in life, because I wasn't diagnosed until I was 21, which is quite late. Most people are diagnosed when they're children. So, my dyslexia story starts at the very beginning. I was born 7 weeks premature and I'm an identical twin. I was the smaller twin, and it's common for the smaller twin, especially in premature twins, to have slower development and to learn more slowly than a kind of healthy, typical baby would. So when I was at primary school, and I started to have problems with reading and writing, everybody thought it was just because I was the younger twin, I was the smaller twin. When I went to primary school, I took longer than other students to learn to read and write, and longer than my twin sister Louise as well to learn to read and write. So I was put into the PIP group, which was a group to support the students who were struggling with their reading and writing. So during English lessons, I'd leave the classroom and be taught in a small group things like letter formation and which way round letters went. And those skills were really useful. And I can look back and see what I did in the PIP group and see that I used those skills when I was older to mask my dyslexia, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The PIP group was very successful. It taught me how to read and write, and by the time I was 7, I was working at the same level as other students. However, I was having problems with the speed at which I was writing, because I worked very, very slowly. I couldn't finish barely half of a task in the time that we were given to do it, and I was also complaining of pain in my eyes and in my head when I read or tried to concentrate for any period of time. These symptoms were put down to traumatic stress from a car accident I'd been in just before I turned 6. So again, looking back, I can see that those were symptoms of dyslexia that weren't picked up on because it was dismissed as belonging to a different disability. And so I think it's important to remember that lots of people with disabilities have more than one disability, and it's important to investigate all symptoms without first attributing them just to another disability that the person is already diagnosed with. The work at primary school got much quicker, but I was still utterly terrible at spelling. I would spell the same word like 3 different ways in one paragraph. I was terrible at spelling, and it was really frustrating because I would spend hours and hours learning my spellings and learning my vocab, and I still couldn't do it. And I thought I was just being lazy and stupid, but actually I had dyslexia. And if I'd been diagnosed, I could have been given tools and skills to help me overcome those problems. But because nobody had picked up on my dyslexia, I just had lots of arguments with my mum about spellings instead. When I was in the older years of primary school, I realised that one of the reasons I struggle to read, and it takes me so long, is because the words and the letters jump about on the page, and I was also still getting eye pain and head pain. And I remember speaking to my stepdad about it, and I told him what I was experiencing and how frustrating and annoying it was. And he said to me, "Oh, maybe you have dyslexia." And then later said, "Oh, actually no, that was a throwaway comment. I don't think you have dyslexia. There's no point pursuing anything for it." And I still look back at that moment because that could have been a turning point in my education. I could have had a diagnosis whilst I was younger and had access to the teaching and the skills that I would have needed to make school life so much easier for me. So I feel quite sad about that. And I guess my main message is, if you think you or someone you know might have a learning disability, push for an assessment as early as possible, because my school experience would have been so much better if I'd been diagnosed with dyslexia. I went and had an eye test just to check there was nothing wrong with my eyes, and there wasn't. But again, there was no discussion of dyslexia. And so I just carried on doing my best. I went to secondary school, and whilst I was there, I did very well academically. I think I managed to mask a lot of my dyslexia symptoms, because I was able to learn processes and learn how to do things to kind of almost trick people. It's very hard to explain. I find it quite hard to articulate what it was like. And obviously I didn't know I had dyslexia, so I just thought I had to work really hard because I was stupid. And I remember a friend asking me, why do you work so hard? Like, why do we never see you outside of school? Why do you spend all your time working? And I remember saying, it's because I have to work 3 times harder than everybody else to learn anything. And now I look back and I just think, yeah, that was dyslexia. Looking back, it was so obvious it was dyslexia. And I did well in my GCSEs, but I worked very slowly, and that caused lots of problems because I had to spend all my time working. I didn't see friends. I had a few friends, but I didn't see anyone outside of school. I didn't play board games with my family. I remember at school holidays, one half term, I didn't leave the house at all and spent most of the time at my desk, because that was how hard I had to work to learn things, because I was trying to work through the dyslexia without knowing any of the skills or the coping techniques, and so it was taking me so much longer to learn things. I think one of the reasons my dyslexia wasn't picked up at secondary school was because it was such a large school. There were 2,000 students, and the teachers didn't have the time to sort of realise how much I was struggling. And when I was doing okay academically, I was going to pass all my GCSEs, and in fact I did very well in them. There were no spare resources to dedicate to helping me. And so that frustrates me, because I think if I'd been diagnosed with dyslexia when I was at primary school, then I would have been able to access more help when I was at secondary school. And so the lack of diagnosis had a knock-on effect. During my GCSEs, I learnt to write more quickly. And in all my exams and all my coursework, I used a carpet bombing technique. My brain struggles to decide what information is relevant and what isn't, and how to structure information, so I repeat myself a lot. So I remember in my history coursework, I had to write about the suffragettes, and I wrote pages and pages and pages. I wrote my conclusion twice. I repeated everything. It must have been a complete nightmare for my teacher to mark. I really feel for him. And so it would have been much easier for everyone if I'd been given access to the skills I needed to work in an efficient, productive way. Then I changed schools for A-levels. I went to a secondary school a grammar school in Blackburn, and that school was really good. They were amazing. The teachers were amazing. Shout out to all the Quegs teachers. And they didn't pick up on my dyslexia, but that doesn't surprise me, because by the time you're kind of 17, no one, like most people who have dyslexia have been diagnosed already. They're not looking for dyslexia in 17-year-olds. And also I was doing well academically. Again, I struggled to pick out what was relevant. I worked slowly. I couldn't structure information. And reading took me hours. I would spend hours and hours and hours reading. And that was really challenging. At sixth form, I worked very hard, and I developed chronic fatigue syndrome. Well, I'd had chronic fatigue syndrome for a while, but I got diagnosed whilst I was at sixth form. And so all the problems I was having with processing words and reading and words jumping about on the page, I put all of that down to chronic fatigue syndrome, and I think everyone else around me did too. And so nobody was thinking, maybe this could be dyslexia, which made things challenging. And then I went to university, and I did my first year at university without a dyslexia diagnosis, and my work wasn't very good. I kept being told that it was scientifically very good, but that the structure was terrible. And I even got one essay back where the tutor had written, "This is slightly shambolic," on my essay. And I started to, I'd got involved in disability activism, and I'd become aware of the kind of broad spectrum of disabilities and how people can have more than one disability. And I started thinking, well, maybe my problems with reading and writing aren't due to chronic fatigue syndrome. Maybe they're due to dyslexia. So I had a dyslexia assessment, a specific learning disability assessment. I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dyscalculia. And then I started study skills support tutoring, which was amazing. It was provided through the University Disability Advisory Service, and my work has improved so much. I can structure work. I have skills to work out what's relevant. I have skills to work out how to build arguments. So for me, having a dyslexia diagnosis has been amazingly positive. Firstly, because it explains to me the problems I've experienced all my life, and reinforces to me that I'm not stupid and I'm not lazy. I have a learning difficulty. And also, it's useful to have a diagnosis because it does mean I can access the skills and the help and the support. And it does mean that I can work much better than I would be able to without a dyslexia diagnosis. So I view the diagnosis as one of the really, really positive things that's happened in my life. So that was a quick overview of my kind of dyslexia story, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll hopefully do a similar story for dyscalculia as well. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and see you next time.